Avery, whose show is this? And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge Podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, Senior Lakers Insider for Clutch Points. And today on the show, it's a loaded show. I was going to talk about Luka Doncic because in the last episode, I had somebody say, well, they think Luka is going to be the best player in the league this year. And I'm not dismissing that possibility. I think he has the talent to be able to do something like that. And I was going to talk about what that could potentially look like. And I had it all outlined. I had it all ready to go. I am going to come back to that topic in a more expanded form, probably with a guest, because that's the kind of thing I just enjoy talking about with somebody else. But then this morning, Marc Stein in his Substack wrote about the prospect of Andrew Wiggins and that connection to the Lakers, a connection that I've been making all summer, dating back to free agency and that busyness earlier on in the summer. And he says that Wiggins is actually the kind of player that the Lakers could be interested in, and says that the Lakers, now that they have Luka Doncic re-signed long term, that they aren't as hesitant to add any long-term money. So that actually has obviously some ramifications that extend well beyond just Wiggins. So we'll talk about that. It would appear that I have not updated the background for this episode, so that's a little embarrassing. I'll do that while I talk. And then the other topic that I wanted to hit on here today is a Kawhi Leonard theory that has kind of been making the rounds. And it's one of those if this, then this kind of a deal. But if the Clippers, are found guilty of cap circumvention, one thing that the league could do is nullify Kawhi Leonard's contract with the Clippers. And depending on how that would look, that could put the Lakers in a situation where they could sign Kawhi Leonard for whatever they would be able to offer. And we'll talk about what some of their tools would be here. But you could potentially, I guess, land Kawhi Leonard as a free agent if the league does decide that the Clippers kept Kawhi Leonard or re-signed Kawhi Leonard by way of cap circumvention. If the league decides just to nullify that contract, that could theoretically make him a free agent. So we'll talk a little bit about that, right? Because we've been talking all summer about the Lakers needing to clear up a roster spot for somebody who could potentially help them. Amir Coffey has come to mind, right? They lost Jordan Goodwin. It's been a long summer, but they lost, they lost a meaningful player, somebody who helped them legitimately last season. And they could have avoided doing that had they made the consolidation trade that I've been reporting they were trying to do. So we'll talk about that as well. So, considering it's a random Monday in September, right? It is September 8th. My Vikings kick off their season tonight. Plenty to talk about today. So let's go ahead and dive on in. A quick reminder, please do hit subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcast, preferably on Odyssey, because I am a company man. If you guys are listening or watching this right now via Twitter, I've been warning you guys that by the time we get to the season, I would like to move all of these live streams exclusively over to YouTube because Twitter's numbers are a little weird. But if you're on Twitter, head on over to youtube.com/@LakersLounge. And then if you guys are already at YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button to make it so that you don't miss any of these shows here moving forward. And yeah, let's go ahead and just dive on in. So we'll start with the Wiggins thing, because it is like applicable, I guess, quote unquote news that this connection is being made again. And Marc Stein, I'll pull it up really quick. But in his latest for Substack, he wrote about the Lakers and how he says, quote, "The Lakers are in win now mode." Um, and he goes on and later says, "Who is the sort of player who is likely to interest the Lakers, as they may now be in more win now mode," which, by the way, LeBron probably pretty happy about. My read, I'm quoting Mark here, my dude Mark, fellow Cal State Fullerton grad. Always got to say that. But my read, if Miami were to make him available, Andrew Wiggins. Wiggins, 30, will earn $28.2 million this season and holds a $30.2 million player option for 2026 and 27. I wouldn't have classified him as a potential purple and gold target before Doncic's long-term future was secured, but things are different now. So my sense is that the Lakers would have interest if the Heat in the coming weeks or months decide to prioritize financial flexibility and look to reduce payroll. Miami acquired Wiggins in its trade last February that sent Jimmy Butler to Golden State and was prepared to include Wiggins in trade dialogue with Phoenix before the Suns agreed to ship Kevin Durant to Houston in June. Yet the Heat have more recently signaled that they expect Wiggins to start the season on South Beach. All right, end quote, by the way. So I reported, man, I can't even, I should go back and find it when I wrote about it for Clutch Points, talked about it here on the show. But the Lakers and Miami Heat held trade talks for Andrew Wiggins that extended beyond, like, it was in that weird middle ground where it extended beyond, hey, you have Andrew Wiggins on your team. We would like Andrew Wiggins. It extended beyond that, like, initial conversation, but it stopped shy of when teams would have to notify players' agents that their names are coming up in these trade negotiations. So it was in that weird spot where it never got particularly close over the summer. Now, that is for, I believe, a few reasons. As Mark says, the Lakers' priority this summer was getting Luka Doncic to ink his extension. And while they waited for the kind of confidence that they eventually had, and then obviously the actual signature, while they waited for all of those things, the Lakers were kind of hesitant to muddy their books with any long-term money. Then, over the course of the summer, it became clearer and clearer and clearer that Luka was going to sign his extension. And, by the way, very importantly, sign it at his first available moment, right? Where it was the morning that Wiggins could, or that Luka could sign his contract. That thing was done, and both sides were able to move forward. And so that was one factor. Mark is absolutely right to point that out. But the other couple factors here is that, and now this is where there are a couple different stories, but one story, and the one that I heard more directly, was that the Miami Heat were asking for Rui Hachimura. They were asking for a first round pick. They were asking for Gabe Vincent, whom they like, and potentially also Dalton Connect. The Lakers, I think, would be fine moving on from Dalton for Wiggins. They would obviously also be fine moving on from Gabe Vincent for Andrew Wiggins. And I also think they would probably be mostly fine moving off of Rui Hachimura for Andrew Wiggins. But they definitely did not want to include Rui and the one first round pick that they can move this season. And so that was where, again, I heard directly that those talks kind of broke down. Now, there's another theory that's kind of running around out there that the Lakers were not interested in Andrew Wiggins, and that the Miami Heat actually approached the Lakers about Wiggins so that the Heat could clear their books for next summer for the pursuit of Giannis Antetokounmpo or Nikola Jokic, and but more specifically Giannis, and that the Lakers in this retelling of the story, that the Lakers did not want Andrew Wiggins because they want their books to be clear for Giannis as well. Again, that wasn't something that I heard directly. This is kind of a different version of the story that I've heard secondhand, but do I've heard it enough to where I think I can mention it here. Well, I know I just mentioned it, so I can't think I can. But the thing with that version of the story is that at the end of the day, Andrew Wiggins is going to be 31 with a player option for an expiring 30 million bucks, and he's still very much a useful player. He would immediately become a starter on the Lakers. So this idea that the Heat or the Lakers would not want to take on Wiggins' contract because it would complicate their pursuit of Giannis, I just don't quite see it. Expiring contracts are maybe a little less valuable now than they were in years past. But now, and we'll talk about some of the other ramifications of this report in a second. But yeah, I've just never, I've, when I was hearing that the Lakers were hesitant to take on Wiggins' contract because of those complications in their pursuit of Giannis, I always thought that was a bit of a red herring because it's expiring money and he's still a very good player. So I do believe that the holdup is still the talk of assets here. I do believe that the place where these talks kind of broke down was when Miami also pushed for a first round pick for him. And it really kind of reminds me of Brooklyn with Dorian Finney-Smith a year ago, where the prior offseason, Brooklyn was asking for a first rounder and then stuff. And everybody looked at Brooklyn and was like, no. And they decided not to trade for Dorian Finney-Smith that last offseason. Then you get to the actual regular season and the price drops initially, and it drops further and it drops further and it drops further till finally the Lakers were able to get Dorian for D'Angelo Russell's expiring contract and didn't have to include a first round pick for him. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's how this played out here too, where Wiggins, because he has that player option from at least just contractually speaking, is seen as a little less feasible an acquisition than Dorian Finney-Smith was last year. Now Wiggins is a better player at this stage of his career than Dorian, so the price for him is higher than D'Angelo Russell's expiring contract and some second round draft capital. But I do believe that, by the time we get to December or, January, and let alone as we get close to the trade deadline, that Wiggins' name will pop back up in trade talks, and that his price tag will have dropped to a point where the Lakers are a little bit more comfortable with it. And the sides will pick up those conversations at the onset of the season, at the onset of training camp, and maybe they'll figure something out before the season starts, and they'll Miami will try to get whatever they can before the price drops as low as Dorian's eventually did. Maybe think that's how this will play out then. But I don't see the Lakers giving up both Rui and a first round pick for Wiggins. And I do think that ideally here for the Lakers, they find a way to move Maxi Kleber's contract and Gabe Vincent's contract and Dalton Connect's contract, and then maybe another minimum type deal or whatever when they can move minimums, and they actually are able to get Wiggins without moving Rui. From a pure basketball standpoint, that would be the best outcome here for the Lakers, because you don't want to trade away your sixth best player when you're kind of on the outside looking in of the true contenders. You need to hold on to any real NBA talent that you have, especially playoff proven talent as Rui is. Ideally, the Lakers would be able to get Wiggins without moving Rui, and would have both of those useful wings for the eventual pursuit of playoff seeding, and then obviously success in the playoffs. So yeah, this was interesting to see come about again today. Harrison messaged me in Slack and was like, "Hey, look, there's this thing." And yeah, I mean, it is kind of nice to have some of my reporting confirmed in this indirect way, but end of the day, I don't think the two sides are very close right now at all, and this is the kind of thing that they would have to revisit by the time we get to the season, and we'll see what comes of it. But I do want to touch also on the implications of the Lakers being willing to take on longer term salary, because that is a huge detail, maybe even more important than Wiggins on his own. So to this point, right, one of the major questions that I've had about the assets that the Lakers actually are looking to utilize this season is, well, your expiring contracts aren't really all that valuable so long as you are hoping to also land guys on expiring deals. And I think that has really kind of hamstrung what the Lakers were looking to do this summer. The one thing I would say about Marc Stein's report about, things changing now that the Lakers have Luka re-signed to that extension long term, the Lakers were never all that worried, I don't think, about Luka not re-signing. So if we're to believe that aspect of this, then I don't know when a shift would have occurred where they are now more like, maybe you literally needed to see the ink on the paper with Luka's extension to be more confident and to be more comfortable taking on longer term money. That seems a little pedantic to me, but regardless, let's just say now the Lakers are more open to taking on longer term contracts. Well, now you can hop on the trade machine, and every team that, like, what I would do if I were you guys, and I'll do this probably in a show eventually as well, but just go through teams that you don't see a bright future for in this upcoming season and see if you can find like Sacramento. They're going to be a mess this season. Is there a useful wing on Sacramento? uh Look at, the San Antonios, or Dallas is another intriguing option here, right, depending on how likely it is that Kyrie makes a return this season. Look in the Eastern Conference at teams that maybe you're kind of squinting through beer goggles and seeing this great bright future of making a Cinderella run in the postseason that would be quelmed or squashed pretty early in the season by reality. And like Charlotte comes to mind, or some of these other teams that like, again, as I've said all summer, there are a lot of teams, and more importantly, there are a lot of owners out there who are looking at the play-in spots. That's a good one there too, G-Dog. Haywood Highsmith is a good name to drop here too. Brooklyn is another team that, like, they are basically stockpiling assets for the sake of taking on contracts that teams don't want. Well, eventually they aren't going to want those contracts either. So they're going to be open for business over the course of the season as well. So if, like, Wiggins costs an arm and a leg, then does it make more sense to bring in Highsmith for a fraction of the cost? That's going to be something that or do you bring in both, right? Do you go out and get as much wing depth as you can possibly have? There is no such thing as too much wing depth in the modern NBA. So that could be something that the Lakers consider as well. But yeah, I'm looking at a lot of these teams and these owners who have probably told their front office, we aren't going to go into the season tanking. Doesn't mean I want to buy anything right now. Doesn't mean I want to trade for anybody who would give me a better chance at making a postseason run until I actually see that the team looks better. But there are a lot of owners who are basically looking at the landscape of the league, and especially in the Eastern Conference, who are saying, let's pump the brakes on outright tanking. let's tell our fans that we're really, really considering going for it. And then at the beginning of the season, if we suck, then okay, then we'll sell off some of our parts and we will kind of slide back into the below mediocrity that, a lot of our fans are unfortunately kind of used to now. I'm looking at you, Charlotte Hornets fans. So like I just look at a lot of these teams, and if the Lakers have these expiring contracts and these teams, like the one thing you do not ever want to be, right, is an expensive bottom dweller. So if you're one of these teams and you have, a longer or a longish term contract on a still fairly useful player that you can get an asset for, then, you know, maybe after the first few weeks of the season, you take a look at the realities that show themselves to you in the mirror. You pick up the phone and you have these more realistic conversations with teams that do have a legit shot at a championship next season. So with the Lakers, I think they're going to be waiting for those phone calls, and they're going to be kind of conducting some of their own conversations around the league as well at the onset of the season, especially given that their schedule opens up relatively softly. So if the Lakers open up well and a few other teams don't, those conversations will pick up. And now with the Lakers more willing to take on some longer term money or longish term money, that makes it so that that improves the chances that we'll be looking at a team by the end of this upcoming season that can legitimately look itself in the mirror and say, you know what, we could fuck around and win this thing. And honestly, like, um, that's a detail that should kind of brighten your day. All right, so the next thing here, um, I'm gonna save the Luka thing for the end of the show, just because it's the kind of thing that I'm gonna be bringing up on a different episode later anyway. But I want to talk about this Kawhi Leonard thing, where again, there are a few dominoes that obviously need to fall before we start talking about Kawhi Leonard's future and all of this. Um, but according to some reports I've seen out there, and I think The Athletic was on it first. I know Tom Haberstroh also was talking about it as well. But the last time we saw a team get hit for cap circumvention, that contract was nullified, and that player, Joe Smith, became a free agent. In this case, again, there are a few steps, very important steps that would need to happen before we get to this moment. But you could be looking at a situation where Kawhi Leonard becomes a free agent, and that would be really interesting because now, if Kawhi Leonard's contract is nullified and he becomes a free agent that way, he loses a bunch of money. So he's probably going to be looking, just given the way that we know Kawhi is kind of wired now. He's going to be looking to get every penny that he can possibly get. So I would actually probably say that like Brooklyn would stand to benefit the most from Kawhi Leonard's contract being nullified. But let's say it gets nullified and Kawhi is allowed to keep his money as well, where basically the league forces the Clippers to just eat that contract and waive Kawhi Leonard, which honestly would be kind of the outcome I'd be rooting for, to be honest. Because it, like, the one thing I don't want to have happen here is the Clippers to like luck out of the kind of tough contract that they had to sign Kawhi to. But let's say the league basically forces the Clippers to eat the contract. Kawhi gets to keep his money and he becomes a free agent. We know that he wanted to be in LA. We know that the Lakers were very much in the running. They thought they had him back when he was a free agent the first time around. And he probably also really wants to win a bleeping championship. And if he signs with the Lakers on the minimum and he joins Luka and he joins LeBron and he joins whatever other team or whatever other players are still on the Lakers after whatever trade rumors and stuff like that. Like, That's a pretty good situation that he could maybe win himself a championship in. Um, my one thing here is, and I kind of wonder because the league, I was thinking about this the other day. The league basically said that if the like they never fully closed their investigation. They said that if they find any more wrongdoing or if they hear any more wrongdoing, that they would reopen their investigation back into 2019 as well. And if it turns out that Kawhi Leonard, and more specifically here, Uncle Dennis, went team by team by team and played team against each other and try to get all these other extra, like benefits that exceed what is allowed teams to offer, what teams are allowed to offer, in this cap structure. If Uncle Dennis was doing all of these things, I think he or Kawhi probably also deserve a bit of a hit here because, like, okay, you want to say like Kawhi, didn't know anything about this and he was just given $28 million or potentially as much as $50 million or $48 million, had Aspiration LLC not gone under. But like at no point you ask any questions about why you're getting $28 million to do nothing. No moment there where you're like, this is a little shady. It's kind of like finding a bag of cash in Miami. You probably want to leave that one alone, right? Like that cash probably is not gonna. It might be fun for like 15 minutes, but then when somebody who actually should have gotten that bag of cash finds out you have their bag of cash, you're like, uh, well. But in this case here, like if Kawhi Leonard's camp was, and by the way, like this happens all the time. Players do ask, for some, you know, uh, some benefits that exist outside of CBA and cap structures. That's not unheard of elsewhere around the league. So I'm not gonna like, clutch my pearls here and say, nobody else does this. No, that's not true. But the fact that you had the Toronto Raptors kind of blush and say, like, yeah, he was asking a lot, and that the Lakers, right, they also blushed and they were like, that's kind of crazy what he was asking for. And then if it turns out that Uncle Dennis, like, because one of my like joking theories that I think I said it on the show with Pete last week was that part of the reason I thought that KL2 Aspire was the LLC name that they wrote down there was literally just to organize all of the shady deals that Ballmer lined up for Kawhi Leonard and Uncle Dennis and everybody there to keep Kawhi in LA. And if that winds up being the case, you can't just claim, sorry, everybody. Like at that point, if you're fielding those shady offers in the way that Uncle Dennis seems to have fielded all of these shady offers over the years, like at some point, somebody from Kawhi's camp should probably, feel a little bit of a knock there too. So in that sense, nullifying Kawhi's contract does make some sense there from a league perspective of like, this contract was signed under illegal presumptions and illegal extra CBA offerings and stuff like that. I don't think you should keep this contract. I actually think that's probably a fairly fair result here too. I also kind of wonder if the league is going to start kind of keeping a closer eye on the other Uncle Dennis's around the NBA because some of those relationships do get a little foggy. And look, there are plenty of players out there who have had Uncle Dennis's who just steer them in the wrong directions and actually cost them a lot of money. So it might be in like the players union might be okay with some of that stuff if the league does go after some of those relationships that players have with business managers who aren't legal agents and stuff like that. Maybe that's something that the league takes a closer look at as a result of all of this as well. But yeah, the Kawhi getting his contract nullified and becoming a free agent thing is interesting. I think we would have to learn a lot more than we know right now before we get to that point. And this investigation, like as I've been talking about, I do think it's really important that this investigation is legit and that that is very, very thorough. And I think it's also important that this investigation produces something, right? If we walk away from all of this and the league goes like, sorry, everybody, we just couldn't find anything again, I would kind of roll my eyes a little bit. And at that point, I think they would unleash the Wild West unto itself. And we would see how that turns out for these other teams that don't have the sponsorship relationships that the Lakers do. But yeah, I would say that if this investigation is conducted and they find some stuff, as I said yesterday, I think they should look back into all of the Clippers dealings, and I think they should look back into all of Kawhi Leonard's dealings and all of what Uncle Dennis requested of teams to make the Lakers and Raptors kind of scratch their heads at and wonder what the Clippers actually agreed to. So we'll see what comes of it. But Kawhi's contract being nullified and him becoming a free agent, that's the kind of thing that decides who wins championships. That kind of happenstance that close to the season would really kind of go a long way of kind of, whatever team has clean enough books, whatever contender has clean enough books to add Kawhi Leonard into the mix, like that's who wins next year's championship. All right, let's talk about Luka, because I had somebody get kind of upset with me because I said to Iztok Franco in a tweet that anytime the best player in the world gets knocked out of a tournament, it improves the chances of everybody else to win said championship. So I had at least one person say like, well, why is that? Why do we just assume that is Jokic? And it's like, because it is. But just because Jokic either was the best player in the league last year or is currently the best player in the world right now, that doesn't mean that, like, Luka is plenty talented to jump up and grab that spot away from Jokic. Because I think in some order, the top four players in the league are Jokic, Luka, Giannis, and Shea, right? I would say those are the top four players. If you want to throw Anthony Edwards in there as well, you can. I personally would say that the best three players, that belong in that tier are Jokic, Luka, and Giannis. Me personally, that's how I would, especially with Luka being in shape, I would say that that's the top tier there. And then the next tier is like Shea and Anthony Edwards. And then you kind of go from there. And when you get to, when you're in a tier with Jokic and when you're in a tier with Giannis, and you can viably be a part of that conversation, you kind of start splitting hairs as far as like who gets ranked where in that group. And, like it, again, I'm going to expand on this conversation in a later episode, but I do want to talk today about like the things that would have to happen for that to be the case, for Luka to leapfrog those guys. To me, it starts not even on the defensive side, because it's not like the only guy that you would say in that group that is an absolute impact defender, defensive player of the year capable type of presence is Giannis, right? And there's nothing that Luka or Jokic could possibly do to enter that conversation on that side of the ball with Giannis. Same can be said on the other side of the ball, though, where there's nothing that Giannis can realistically do to enter the conversation of the impact that Jokic or Luka can make on offense for their team on any given play. And so like to me, if I'm talking about like what it would look like for Luka to leapfrog those guys or leapfrog Jokic and become the best player in the league, it actually starts with what he does without the basketball on offense and him impacting the game without the basketball on offense, because that's, that's the thing that makes Steph such a headache to deal with over the course of a series or when he has it going, is like at no moment can Steph Curry be on the aggressive side of half court. You can never like not know where Steph is. And more importantly, Steph is like constantly moving around and cutting and floating and coming off of screens and doing all of these things that make him impossible to keep track of. So all while and this is what made those Kevin Durant Warriors impossible to guard, while you have so much of your defense dedicated to making sure Steph doesn't come off of the screen with like half a second too much space, you're also dedicating a whole bunch of resources defensively to Kevin bleeping Durant in isolation on the other side of the court. And that just absolutely wreaked havoc on what teams were able to do defensively against those Warrior teams. Now you kind of you watch like James Harden and you watch Luka, unfortunately, sometimes too, and you watch some of these other guys who are these ball dominant presences who, do like wreck worlds when they have the basketball. But if they don't have the basketball, they just kind of float and they aren't as impactful. One of the things that I think has really extended LeBron's career and made him an impactful player now into his 40s, is that like he does occasionally set the screen, a good hard ball screen for Austin that allows him to catch the ball in the short roll and wreak havoc on offenses that way. The fact that he and Anthony Davis were running horn sets with Austin at the top, and everything that came out of that stuff was just impossible for teams to deal with as well. Like it's really like there are moments obviously where LeBron does load manage on offense, and he also does load manage defensively as well sometimes. But like you look, I never watched LeBron in the half court and get frustrated at him just like not being involved at all, in the same ways that I have been frustrated watching James Harden's career, and I have been frustrated watching Luka Doncic's career at various points. But if Luka figures out a way to be impactful without the basketball, whether it's as a better spot up shooter, something I've heard that he's focused on this offseason, whether it's as a screener, either on or off ball, no matter what it is, like if Luka becomes a player that teams fear even when he doesn't have the basketball, that is an entirely new dynamic to his game that makes him absolutely impossible to deal with. So that's the first thing that I'm going to be looking for in this hypothetical where Luka becomes the best player in the NBA. Second part is like, this is where we do got to talk about the defense. And again, I'm not asking him to become Giannis or Anthony Davis or any of these guys. Like he's not that kind of an athlete. But the one thing that Jokic has figured out a way to do at this stage of his career, and it helps that Jokic is a little bit bigger, but Jokic, because of his understanding of what he looks to do offensively, he's put that understanding of the game to work defensively, and now basically, gums up offenses by, standing there in the middle of them and making some of those passes that all offenses need to make in order to operate at their highest levels. And with Luka, like, especially, let's say the Lakers do go out and somehow get an Andrew Wiggins, and you have like Austin become, and let alone if you have Wiggins and Smart and LeBron and Ayton out there as a unit, like now all of a sudden you have two absolute dogs on the perimeter in Wiggins and Smart to get after it there. You have LeBron, who, when he is fully engaged, is also an impact defender. You have somebody who can clean up some messes there in DeAndre Ayton. Like if you're Luka, all you got to do is don't be a disaster, right? Or even better, gum up those offenses in some of the same ways that that Jokic does. Some of the passes that he would be kind of gumming up are different ones from the types of passes that Jokic kind of gums up. But like those are some of the things that if you watch, teams play against Denver, Jokic really isn't the damaging force that he was in prior years. And that is a big part of why I consider him personally the best player in the NBA. But basically, like, and again, we'll get more into the weeds, and maybe this will be a good Raj conversation. But like to me, those are the two kind of macro level things that Luka needs to improve on, if he's going to do that. And then as far as like what that would mean for the Lakers, if Luka becomes the best player in the NBA, I mean, championship. I'm being straight up. If Luka Doncic is the best player in the NBA, viably the best player in the NBA, wins MVP, is the best player going into every series that the Lakers go into, and now all of a sudden LeBron is the out and out, the outright second best player there. Austin gets slotted in as the third best player there, and you have a supporting cast of DeAndre Ayton, Rui Hachimura, and maybe a couple other role players that the Lakers stack over the course of the season as well. Like that's a champion. That's how championship rosters kind of come together in the second season that they have a superstar. So, yeah, as far as like what's on the line, you're talking about the 18th ring, and boy, I'm getting pumped thinking about it. And I do think it is like legitimately something that could happen this season. I'm not sitting here like when I saw those comments there, I wasn't dismissing them, outright. I do think he's talented. Luka is talented enough to be the best player in the NBA. 100% believe it. There are some shifts that always needed to happen in terms of his approach to the sport and his approach to being a professional. And I think there's also some tweaks that needed to happen for him to be, to consistently rank up there with those guys. But he's absolutely, look at what he's doing in Eurobasket right now. I think he's scoring like 38% of his team's points. That's unheard of. That's higher than any ratio that Michael Jordan ever had. And not to say that he needs to do that with the Lakers. He's playing on a team with some pretty good scorers. But if he's capable of like carrying this performance from Eurobasket into this upcoming season, and he does legitimately become, a player who wins MVP over a Nikola Jokic or over a Giannis Antetokounmpo or over a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or over an Anthony Edwards, then the Lakers are a legitimate, bona fide championship contender. And that's something we all should be rooting for. All right. I am going to scroll through here and see what's, if you guys had any questions over the course of the show, and I'm not really seeing any. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and end this thing here. My son has also been banging on the office door, so I probably should make sure that he is alive and healthy and all of those things. So until the next time you guys hear from me, I'm Anthony Irwin saying have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's. Hit that like and subscribe button, all of those good things. And please, Vikings, don't embarrass me tonight. Please. Have a good one, everybody.